Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna, and I am with H.E.A.T. This afternoon, we have Maya and Nancy from the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, the Human Exploitation and Human Trafficking Program, and we will be going back and forth in a dialogue, and where they will share their organization, what they do, and ways in which you can get involved. So let's get started. First of all, tell us a little bit about your organization, where you guys are located, what you guys do, that sort of thing.
So I'm Nancy O'Malley, and I'm the District Attorney of Alameda County, which is in California, an elected position. And Maya is our human trafficking, our H.E.A.T watch coordinator. We created a specialized unit back in 2005 of prosecutors that involved prosecutors, investigators that worked in the district attorney's office, as well as victim advocates, to really focus on prosecuting human trafficking cases. And in addition to that, we really looked at it collaboratively. Our program evolved with the help of Maya to be a 5-prong program that's run through the district attorney's office. And the 5 different prongs are aggressive and strong prosecution of perpetrators of trafficking, aftercare and support for non-government, non-profit organizations that serve victims once they're rescued to help restore a life. We do a lot of training with law enforcement, another prong. We really engage the community so that the community can start to embrace the victimization rather than make judgment about people who we know are victims of trafficking. Because what we believe is that if our community judges the victim, then they can make them invisible. And we need them to be visible, so we will do something about it. And then the last prong is really to change the laws and talk to our policymakers and make sure there are enough resources put into combating human trafficking. And what Maya has done so beautifully is her belief, and I'll let her speak for herself, is really we need to reach victims where they are. And so Maya, you want to talk a little bit about some of the things you've done?
Sure. So part of the component that Nancy was discussing was that community engagement. And so we've done that multiple ways. We do that, yes, online, so we do engage through social media tools. We also created and are currently creating our comic book called Audrey, detailing a survivor story. So that's going to be used as an educational tool for youth, but then also adults who like reading comic books. Also, we create short PSAs, and we recently filmed another youth from Oakland who gave a spoken word piece, and we filmed that, who basically talks about her own ignorance as a community member to this issue that Nancy was talking about, keeping them invisible, but by addressing it, they're no longer invisible. We also go out and we go to schools. One thing that we're launching right now is our Youth Action Network, and what that really is looking like is school prevention, school education around human trafficking to help prevent, because we all know that especially with commercial sexual exploitation of children, that starts in our schools. Mm-hmm. And so recently we had the Oakland Youth Commission here in Oakland, California, come together around a meeting to discuss the need for human trafficking education prevention in our schools. And Nancy's taking a really strong lead on that in our offices as well, to really address the needs of students, because students are recruiting other students, but then students can also say, wait, let's stop this right now. And so we're going into schools. We go into continuation high schools, but also other schools in our county, and that's something that we're definitely developing.
One of the really, I think, very important parts of our program is that when we see a need or a gap, that we step up and fill it. And where we might be doing it ourselves initially, we really are looking for our community partners to join together. So, for instance, there was no program, aftercare program, and there was really no program for young women that were coming into the system, and we recognized their victimization. So Maya created a program called Safety Net, where we now talk with all the people involved in that child's life after care to make sure that they're still okay and that we still are supporting them. We have a young women's empowerment program, which we do on Saturday mornings, of young women who have been trafficked, to help them have their life be different and build their own skills of independence and safety. And then by really starting these programs ourselves and then identifying the partners that can step up and fill those voids, that we are building stronger programs and getting more agencies and more organizations involved.
Wonderful. And how do you guys go about identifying the needs in your community?
Well, first thing we do is we hear from victims about what's really happening, and we listen to what victims are telling us. And we have the eyes and ears that we've trained ourselves, and we're training the community to pay attention to what they see and to not shy away from it, not be afraid to pick up the phone, make the phone call to our hotline, or get the police involved, or get an organization involved. And that's really been one of the strongest components of our program, is that having the cultural shift in our community to stop judging and letting people be invisible, and to understand that there is a thing called human trafficking, and it's in every neighborhood, in every community. And if we don't think that's true, we're not looking. The other thing we have a very strong program around children who are trafficked, but we also have a big program, and we've prosecuted several cases that have involved labor trafficking. And so we're not limiting it to sex trafficking. We really are looking at the broad spectrum and constantly talking about it in our community. One of the other things we do is we put our money where our mouth is. So the Attorney General of California recently released a report that showed that of all the prosecutions for human trafficking in California that have occurred since it became the law, this office, Alameda County DA's office, has prosecuted 46% of those. So we prosecute almost half the cases in California that have been prosecuted already. And our conviction rate is about 79%.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Which is really high for anything.
Very high.
And how have you guys found the community to respond to your efforts?
Well, when I first started talking about this, which was many years ago, probably the last 10 years or more, that at first people didn't want to believe it was really happening. Then we started really engaging youth. And really the kids, and this goes to what Maya was talking about, when we started going into the high schools or going to youth conferences and talking to people who work with youth, the youth get it. They see it every day. They don't have the tools. Before there were no resources, or there wasn't an avenue for a kid to report something was happening. But they all saw it, and really that's a place where we've seen such tremendous response from our kids who are really telling us how it could be that a child could become vulnerable to being trafficked. How could it be that somebody who had no intention of being involved in this, and it wasn't their decision, all of a sudden find themselves being held captive? And what is the best way we can to rescue and restore that child? And really with the community in Alameda County, the community response has been very, very strong. People now identify Heat Watch. They understand our businesses are putting posters in their windows. Our schools are calling us saying, please come and talk to our schools. Train our teachers. That's the kind of response we're getting. And I'm so really thrilled with the community response to shifting the tide in how we embrace and combat trafficking.
And actually, we recently had the first Heat Watch national conference back in June 2012. We had over 500 attendees from across the nation come, 67 speakers. That was a 3-day conference. And we had and the majority there's a large basically population within the attendees that were community. And then they went outside afterwards, and I talk to them on Facebook all the time, I email them, we call each other, and I know what they're doing. They're constantly saying, hey, when are you having your next conference? Hey, what can we do? How can we volunteer? And we are definitely engaging with one another constantly.
And you know, one of the horror that we're all seeing played out in Cleveland with those young women that were held captive. If there's one thing that comes out of that situation, it's that everybody should recognize that there are traffickers that live on our streets. They live in houses that look like the houses we live in. They're conducting their business behind closed doors. And it isn't just sex trafficking or slavery in that arena, but that there are people that are indentured servants, they're being held captive in homes. And now we know. You know, our message has always been trafficking is everywhere. It's happening everywhere. Now this just reinforces that message.
Definitely. It looks like your organization has had a lot of success in your arena. What would you say is the biggest factor behind that success, or what is an attribute that contributes to that success?
The success of what we consider one of our greatest successes? Is that what you're asking?
The question was, what do you guys attribute your success to as an organization?
Well, clearly it is the commitment of all of the staff that work in this office. Everybody who's been assigned to or involved in our human trafficking, our H.E.A.T Watch program, has been very, very committed. It's not just a job. We own the problem in this county. We tell the truth about the problem in this county, and we're going to help solve the problem in this county and across this country. So because the individuals that have been assigned to or involved in our H.E.A.T Watch program are so committed, that passion comes through, and that's very infectious. So when we send Maya out to speak to an organization, that organization now becomes the trainers, and they take her passion and take it out to their communities, and it's like snowball effect. So that's really the first and foremost, is that this office, the people that I work with, and myself I include, are so committed and passionate about combating trafficking. That has led to success. The other part is that we've been very strategic. So we're not just running after and responding. We're actually being proactive. Through our H.E.A.T Watch radio, which Maya created, we have podcasts. We are using all the social media technology that we can to get the word out and to engage people and to keep that dialogue going. And I think that strategic assessment and the creation of our H.E.A.T Watch blueprint, which we follow and have shared across the country with many communities, that giving some structure of what's our strategy and how are we going to get to our end result has been very, very helpful for us to get to our success point.
And actually, I do want to definitely mention having a great leader to look up to follow. She's very innovative and has always really supported us whenever we see a need to fill. We go and we talk with her, and she says, go, do something, go and make it happen. And that's definitely felt throughout the unit. And also, she was I think you were one of the first to try human trafficking cases in Alameda County. She had identified this problem in the courtroom before she was elected a DA. That's something that is absolutely felt. It's a priority for Nancy to focus on human trafficking in our community, and it's felt, and we see the results. So that's something to definitely acknowledge.
I also think the last thing I'll add is that we aren't just focusing on prosecution. Our aftercare is critically important to us, whether we're supporting organizations that are providing the aftercare or we ourselves are involved in it. We're finding money. We're using the laws to the benefit of providing access and services to individuals, victims who have been rescued. And, you know, that's also critically important. We can't just focus on prosecution. We have to look at the entire spectrum. And the same commitment we have to stop trafficking and to rescue victims from trafficking also carry through to empower particularly young women that they can have a life of safety and stability and financial independence, so they never think they have to rely on someone else or they have to be under the control of someone else in order to have a fulfilling life.
Definitely. And I'm interested to hear how both of you became interested in the subject of human trafficking.
The media? Or both of us?
Yes.
Oh. So, back in 1994, I was the head of the sexual assault unit for my office. I created that unit here when I was a deputy DA. And as Maya said, I got a grant. I wrote a grant application to the state to focus on the sexual exploitation of teenage girls and boys by adults. So I got a grant, and the first case I had was a case of human trafficking. And it involved a 12-year-old girl who was being trafficked. We didn't call it that. We called it other things. But pretty soon, as I was listening to all of these young women that I was engaging with and going out to the schools and talking about exploitation, I started hearing the stories over and over again. And so too did a judge in our juvenile division. And so she and I got together. And so way back in 2001, I put on a conference here in the county that was a statewide conference. And we did it 3 years in a row around teenage issues. And that was the first time I found someone to come and talk about human trafficking of children. And, that was in 2001. And still people were sitting there going, nah, that's not what we're talking about. These are teenagers. They're all jerks or whatever. And I remember one prosecutor in my group said, hey, these girls are all, they're all making this choice. And I said to her, I cannot believe that you are put in charge of going to court to speak for victims, and that's your attitude. Shame on you. And the whole room was kind of like, wow. And we said, you need to get out of this business. You need to go prosecute robbers because you're not good for empowering victims and recognizing victimization. And because of her judgment about that victim, that got conveyed to the jury and nobody cared. So really that was, for me, that's what sparked it. I looked at these young women and young boys and said, we owe them a better life. And so as my career evolved here in the office, I was able to, once I became the district attorney, we were able to really implement this plan. And Maya, we found Maya and stole her away from some very important people to have her come work with us. And she'll tell you about her background.
Yes, thank you. So actually, the issue of human trafficking is extremely personal for me because, and I actually don't really tell too many people about this, but might as well right now in a Google Hangout, right? But I actually have a really close family friend, and she had been trafficked by her father when she was a kid. And then she later on had her own child. And looking back now through the lens of my work, I realized that that child had actually been a victim of commercial sexual exploitation. When I realized that, I was in college, and at that time we're all searching for what are we going to do with our lives. And I knew that I wanted to do human rights work, but because this became so personal for me, that is what's in my heart. And so that sort of pushed me forward. And so after I graduated, my husband told me, okay, now you have to choose. You really have to do something. And at the time, there was no job to fight human trafficking. There was no human trafficking coordinator or human trafficking director or human trafficking this. So I set out to do that on my own after hours. So I started my own radio show. I ended up working as a fellow with the Polaris Project, so I got to work with human trafficking survivors, which I'm very grateful for. And then I'm so grateful and fortunate to have met and connected with the district attorney, Nancy O'Malley, because I really hounded my way into this job at one point. I said, I want to work for you. Let me know what you want me to do. And lo and behold, I was very fortunate for them to also.
And for us. Yeah.
So good to hear the reasons behind both of your work, and that you both obviously have passion for this issue. What would either one of you say, or both of you say, is the most challenging issue in this fight against human trafficking?
I think that the biggest challenge that I see is that we, as a country, have not come to grips yet with how we are able to prevent trafficking. Like, what tools are we giving our children that they don't fall prey to traffickers? And the second thing is that if a child is being trafficked, or anyone, oftentimes the portal of entry to the institution is through being arrested for the commission of a crime. And oftentimes it's involving commercial sex activity. We don't have a good mechanism for separating a victim from the trafficker, and we do know that the bond or the control the trafficker has over that victim is like, crazy glue once it's hardened. What we need to do is, I believe, our challenge is to come up with some process where we can create that separation and be able to kind of deprogram a little bit the survivor, the victim, so that then we can really start to help rebuild a life while we're holding the perpetrator accountable. We don't want to criminalize victims of human trafficking. We work very hard to not do that. And in fact, here in this county, when a child comes into our juvenile justice system, either by being detained by the police or something, we've created an assessment plan so that we can get them out of juvenile justice right away, but we follow them closely through safety net and make sure we don't send them right back into the arms of the trafficker. We also, in the last year and a half, we've had, I think, 5 young women murdered. And this, if that's not a call for action, nothing is. And we really, the amount of danger that our children are put in, both physical danger and health risks that they're put in by traffickers or exploiters, is really quite frightening. So those are the kind of social challenges that I see, and structural challenges that I see, that we have to come up with a good solution that's going to protect and stabilize and keep safe victims of trafficking. Do you want to add to that?
I feel like you really did cover the whole basis. I feel like just observing through safety net, through all the other programs that we have, a lot of the big challenges is systemic. And how do we maneuver that? Really, it's about addressing policy and really looking at it top down to really change from the bottom up. But that's really where one of the biggest challenges are. And then also ideology, but I think that ideology is linked definitely to systemic challenges that we have. How do we address the systemic changes?
Awesome. Is there a project or event that you are currently working on that we at H.E.A.T or our viewers can get involved in and help out with?
I would definitely say the Youth Action Network. That's something that, yes, we are focusing on it in our county, almost like a pilot project, but we want to take that big. It's not just, in a way, it's going to be train the trainer, train the student, so that we go into schools and we train leaders in the schools, and then they train their other classmates. We want to take that national. We also, I know that Nancy and I, we're going to DC to actually talk to, next week actually, to talk to policymakers about the Federal Strategic Action Plan about human trafficking. How do we move forward in that realm? This is something that's very important, and we're really glad to be part of that conversation, and that's really how we want people to engage through that with us.
Awesome. Last question before we wrap up our session. What do you suggest that viewers can do to raise awareness in their own communities, in addition to what you've already mentioned?
Well, one of the things that we really challenge people in our community is talk to their friends about it. Talk to the people that they see. When they see something, be the eyes and ears to make sure that we are able to get people, those who can do something about it, to do something about it. And the other thing is that, especially with youth, We've seen, Maya was talking about one young woman who did a spoken word that we've recorded, that we want, with her permission, of course, make sure that people can see it and hear it. We have another young woman that saw us speak sometime back, and she's from out of our area. But the message that resonated with her was that human trafficking is everywhere. So she took it upon herself to organize in her community, which is all like sort of rural part of California. And it was through her advocacy and all of the youth that she engaged, they made a video which is very profound about vulnerability of youth. And they had a concert. And she got her district attorney and the FBI and the sheriff to create a task force, even though they didn't believe there was any human trafficking going on. And in the first 2 months, this 16-year-old girl and her friends got this task force put together, and they arrested 11 people for human trafficking in the first 2 months.
Oh my goodness.
So we keep talking about stories like that to say, keep the pressure on. Give the message, make sure that your leaders in your area know that human trafficking happens everywhere, and we've got to do something about it.
And also utilize the skills that you have naturally. I didn't, at least, when I was first starting out, I was a community member. I didn't know how do I get involved. I just knew I had to. So I started a radio show. There's other people who are muralists. They're artists. There's actually an artist here in Oakland who he goes around with other volunteers and they create mosaics on trash cans to sort of beautify the community. Well, we're hoping to partner up with our local neighborhood and create mosaics in honor of, the victims that we work with, to put around our trash cans, murals on the streets, music. I noticed on Twitter there's a lot of, artists against trafficking or painters against trafficking. So use the skills that you have to really give back, because yes, it's definitely awareness. There's still awareness that needs to be had around language that Nancy was talking about. How do we call victims? How do we call traffickers? But there's so many ways to really address this issue. And if you have a good skill to share, go and do it.
Great. Well, thank you both for your time and sharing all that amazing information and suggestions. For more information about the Alameda County's DA's office, visit www.heat/watch.org, or you can visit htag.org for more information about them. Thank you for tuning in and joining the fight to combat human trafficking. My name is Anna, and I'm an abolitionist.